Episode. This is the 28th one, and we are here with Jared from Fundamentals. And they are trying to redefine the fantasy sports industry through fully liquid performance based token systems. So, we're going to learn a little bit more about what exactly that's about today, learn a little bit more about Jared as a founder and his journey into this space. And if any of you guys have questions through this, feel free to put it in the chat. We'll answer them. But dude, Jared, welcome to the podcast, man. I love starting off with the question of how exactly did you get into the Web3 space? How did you
Um,
find yourself here building this?
so originally, I've been in crypto space for almost its inception. I used Bitcoin back, as a tool to get on some of those gambling sites. So there was times where I was holding a couple, 15, 30 Bitcoin like it was like nothing. So after I got rid of it, you know, uh, and I
Mhm.
saw what it did in price. It put me in this space to the point where I'm now looking at it in a different view. So as I've seen it evolve through smart contracts and things of that nature, I've been following along with it. I never thought I'd be a part of the ecosystem personally. That's just kind of a perfect marriage that took place um, that I think solved a lot of our issues. Uh, that's how I got into it. I just I was around.
So, dude, it's always funny whenever I hear these stories of when people got in super early, where they had 15 Bitcoin, 25 Bitcoin, 30 Bitcoin, 100 Bitcoin, 1,000 Bitcoin. Most of the time, it isn't from the gambling side, though. It's from like buying weed or something on Silk Road. But so when you first, I'm curious, like when you were first messing with Bitcoin, how exactly did you find out about it? And did you think it was gonna get to where it is today?
I had no idea that like the price could move when I first learned about it. I just thought it was that's what it was. I learned about it through a buddy of mine who's a really intelligent person, and he was actually mining it back in the day. I haven't heard from this guy in 20 years, so I, but he was telling me about kind of like what this thing is and blah blah blah. That's how I knew about it. Um, I used it. I couldn't tell you how much of it I had, but I like to play poker online, and it was taboo in my state or other states. So you play offshore. You didn't actually plan on like withdrawing anything because it's a foreign entity. You just play to play. So I didn't really think of it as money. It was just my ability to play poker. So I honestly, if I could remember that account, there's probably Bitcoin on it. Because I haven't touched it in I don't know how long. But most of it came from him. He was actually mining it back in the day when it was pretty much worthless. I had no idea it would go up in value until it did. When it did, that's when I was like, okay. Then I started to get into why did it and things of that nature.
Dude, that's awesome, man. Yeah, it's funny. My dad is super into poker, and he would always play on the computer as well. Because in North Carolina, in the United States, it was illegal for a while playing poker online and some of that stuff. So I remember he would get into these different online tournaments like with prizes and stuff like that. But I don't know if he got into the Bitcoin.
Yeah, I like I said, I didn't plan on actually withdrawing anything. I didn't expect that they'd give me anything if I won. I would just kind of playing because at the time there wasn't a lot of free poker sites, and then if there was, it's not played the same way. You almost need real money in the game to be honest, But I didn't play with much. I mean, $5, $6, But at that time, it was a lot. If I knew that I was playing with hundreds of dollars of future money, might have played differently.
Might have played differently, yeah. And moving on to your sort of project here, fundamentals. I was able to look at it a little bit before this podcast, but what's sort of the overview breakdown of what you guys are trying to do?
Well, what we're trying to do is multiple things that all kind of came together at one time. As a person who's been in the space, the crypto space for a long time, and just witnessing, as a fan of sports and just being around it, um, they it kind of came together. What we're trying to do is change the way people look at NFTs. Now, we're actually tokens, but I think the difference between tokens and fungible and non fungible tokens are close enough that they can be in the same category here. We want to change the way people look at them and the way that builders utilize their characteristics. I'll give you an example. Nike, right? They use NFTs. Now, a lot of people like know this, but there's a very big street sale market for shoes, and so one of the ways that Nike could verify that their shoes were authentic was they had an NFT that had the serial number of the shoe on them. Now they don't sell these NFTs, right? But they're using it for its original intended purpose. And that's more taking the unique qualities of an NFT and using it almost like a serial number. We kind of want it to be more like that than, hey, we have a unique thing and we want to derive value from its rarity. On top of that, we want to change the way fantasy football is played. I played fantasy football my entire life, and there's always something that you could argue is not perfect. So when I came up with this idea, it originated from fixing all the other ways I would do it if I was a owner. And when these two ideas came, they came at the same time, and it was a perfect fit. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to change fantasy football, fantasy sports, and the way NFTs are viewed in general.
Okay, and what does that look like, I guess? So how does the platform work? I actually have some friends that are super into fantasy football. I haven't really participated too much, but like I know that you kind of pick players that you think are going to do well and they get you points each time they play and you're kind of competing with other people. Like do you want to just give the rundown per se? Cuz I also think there's a fair amount of people that might be listening to this that aren't from America and might not be as familiar with it.
Well, when I say fantasy sports, I do want to include all sports. Now I have to focus on one, so I chose the one that was the easiest for me. I have a pretty extensive background in football, um, but because it functions in a way that doesn't currently exist, we have to actually figure the math out. I can't just put up the platform. Like we're on year 6 of coming up with the original idea, thinking it through, and getting it built. Um, and actually, the building part has been probably the easiest part. We have some really good people on our team um, through JetPlane. I'm sure you know some of that community, but the way that it functions, it's we have an ecosystem. Okay, this ecosystem is the basis of majority of things that would qualify. The easiest way to explain it is let's talk about what we're not. Okay, we're not the stock market, right? I wanted to simplify it, replicate it, and make it familiar. So it's designed similarly, but it is not function with supply and demand when we talk about values. That's a key core difference. It is not an investment that's going to have dividends or interest. We are not a gambling site. We are a gaming site. So I made all this work by taking we isolated the best part of fantasy. So when you play fantasy football, it's not who you pick in the first round of your team. Um, those are important, but that's not what's going to get you to brag to your friends. It's not going to make you feel like you did like a good job. The best part is that last player that you grabbed, or the guy that you took off free agency that nobody wanted. If you play in DraftKings, it's the guy that like you had one player left and you had the barely just a little bit of money and you found somebody. And then that player becomes the point leader of your team. That's the part that makes you like, I won, you know? So we isolated that concept. Another problem is where people will have either a very small community. So like it'll be like a team of 8 in fantasy. And it works the best, in my opinion, in this way. The problem is, you know, Bob down the street doesn't know what you do in your fantasy league. This is why a lot of people like DraftKings, because it's a larger community. You can say, hey, I did this, and everybody was kind of a part of it. So what we tried to accomplish is we tried to bring the good qualities together and take out the bad ones. If you play on DraftKings, you're playing against thousands and thousands of people, playing against them. So the difference between winning money and not winning anything is so small that it no longer feels strategic. It's just a mathematical randomization of how many lineups can I put with these group of players in different, you know, categories. And that kind of takes away from the strategy. And then in traditional fantasy setting, you're playing against 8 people, which is a small community of your friends, and that's great. And you can do that here on our game. But in order to explain the actual fundamental tokenomics of it, I had to say all that to say that. So you want to play the game. You are unaffected by anything I do in the game. It's similar to like roulette. Your values and your money that you put on the table is irrelevant to what I'm doing. You may win more often, you may win more money, but you're also going to lose more often and lose more money. The odds don't change in your favor. Okay, that's the biggest part that I think people start to think about when I start to explain the game. When you look at a person's value in fantasy football, you're looking at who is the best quarterback, who is the best running back. In our game, those people aren't necessarily going to have the highest value. And that's because depending on how many people have minted said player, at the end of the week, when they determine who won, that payout is going to be distributed by the amount of tokens of that player. So if you have a player and 100 people have them with you, that payout's going to be divided by 100. If you have a player with only 10 people, it's only divided against 10 people. So essentially what's happening is the person is performing based on the consensus of how he should perform. If a whole bunch of people think this guy's good, then he needs to win at a certain regular basis to satisfy that many people. If not a lot of people like this guy and he wins, then those people will make more value. And that's because nobody believed in that player. He is outperforming the general consensus of what his ability is. So if you think about this for a second, if both of those are true, people in player A eventually will start to leave player A because he's not winning as much, right? And when he loses, he's losing a little bit more. So he becomes more risky to hold than he was before. A certain number of people will decide this. And maybe they go into player B. That makes player B less lucrative to win, right? Making him a little bit less desirable. So now they're starting to level each other. So now player A, who's a better player, who wins more often, right, is actually going to have people leave him. And player B, who people didn't believe in, will start to believe in him. And his mint numbers will start to go up. You understand? So the market will decide where this person's general consensus is of his ability to win. And essentially, that's fantasy sports, right? You're trying to pick a person that a majority people don't like that you believe in. And if he wins, you get paid for it. There's a lot more to it than that, but basically, that's the game. You're going to have people who want to play this person for 1 week. You're going to have a person that wants to play him for the year or his career. When you mint a player, okay, that smart contract will follow that player until retirement. He will, it will automatically, it will allow you to get out when he retires. The funds, when you mint him, go into an account and they stay in that account. It stays in the ecosystem. If you wish to trade or sell him, it's going to be a private sale between two parties. The original amount is still in the ecosystem and it will remain in the ecosystem. So that's the real difference when it comes down to NFTs is when you say, hey, my NFT is worth this much. And again, we're tokens, but it's similar enough. When I say this is worth this much, in our game, it's worth that much because that's how much ADA is in the account associated to it. And if you wanted it, you have it. You can liquidate it. You understand? But we want to help keep it in the ecosystem. So there is a mint fee and a burn fee. This sounds bad because it is 25%. However, if you are an outsider, that's expensive. If you are inside, then that's actually a safety net in both directions. And I can explain it like this. First of all, if you want to get in, you can check the marketplace and not have to mint, and you don't have to pay this fee. So it's possible to get in without the fee. But the concept dictates that you now have play in the marketplace. If you have a player worth 100 ADA, okay, you could sell them for 120 ADA, and it's still cheaper for someone to buy your NFT than to mint a new one. And the opposite is also true. If you have a player and you can't sell him on the marketplace, you know that worst case scenario, you can burn him for 75 ADA. Do you have any questions about kind of that structure so far?
Yeah, so where are the prizes and ADA coming from for the NFTs? Like, let's say that player outperforms, it's not split between a lot of different users because you were able to find a gem and you were able to buy him and not a lot of other people buy him. When he gets points, like where is the ADA coming from to that NFT or that player?
Right. So every token has an account. That account has ADA in it when that token was minted. Of all the accounts together, that is the ecosystem. So if you win, if your token wins, then those tokens are exempt. All the other tokens will reduce 3% of their entire balance into a prize pool. That prize pool will be redistributed amongst the winning tokens. Now, I can take 3% away from a dollar forever, which means when you have our token, you really do have him for his career. It may lower in value, but as they say in poker, you just need a chip in a chair, right? You can come back. So the payout structure will reduce. Like let's use quarterbacks for example. There's situations where a backup quarterback comes in and does really well. There's tons of examples. A lot of people see the thing that makes fantasy football so fun is a lot of people think it's easy, especially the ones who play it. And there's a lot of examples of why everyone's almost wrong. I'll give you this example is on the Patriot down. Matt Castle came in. They won 10 or 11 games that season. And nobody knew Matt Castle at the time. And he did really, really well. right? He's a backup. So if you were to look at him as a quarterback, he would have been like 50, 60th quarterback. There's only 32 teams. So there's not a single fantasy league that had him a part of their team. But you could have in ours. Now, when he wins, right, there's, let's say, 100 quarterbacks in the league. Okay. We have 3 winners. So 3% of 98 players times how many are minted is a substantial amount of ADA. So when you lose, 3% is not fun, but it's very, very small in the grand scheme of things because the prize purse is, you know, big relatively. Depending on how many people are in that ecosystem is kind of determines how big the payout structure is. We don't determine the winner. It is a standard score that everyone's familiar with. And the system will function on its own. It is designed to execute. The ecosystem will be redistributed every week, kind of forever. You can play it however you want to play it.
Okay, and whenever the sort of fantasy season ends, what happens? People just keep their NFTs and there is no new prize pool each week? Or what
Yeah,
happens in off season?
yeah. So, 2 things. One, you can still trade. Lots of stuff happens in the NFL, specifically in the off season. You have the NFL draft, which when we launch, we have a little event for. Um, there's free agency where people move around. And in the NFL, your situation is almost more important than your ability. If you go to a team that utilizes running backs at 60% of the market share of their offense, then even if that running back is an average skilled player, he's going to have more opportunity, which means he's probably going to get more yards. If you have a player getting 50 carries a game and a player getting 2, right? So a lot of people look at that. And then there's a lot of things where you're a developmental player, where you come out in the draft, you watched him in college, and you're like, I like this guy. But it takes a little bit of time to develop. Maybe he gets traded, released, whatever. So there's movement, but there is no prize pool in the off season. However, one thing that is unique to us, due to certain parameters, we like to have a small bump to less fortunate players, and then to also um, benefit for good players. So we're the only team or the only fantasy site that utilizes both preseason and playoffs. So our season doesn't end in the traditional 16 or 18 weeks. It actually extends 3 weeks before and 4 weeks after. So our season's a little bit longer in both sides of a traditional fantasy season.
Okay, and the next question I have with this is like, and I haven't used DraftKings or something like this before, but there's a lot of different sites that have fantasy where you can sort of buy and gamble and stuff like that. What would you say is the main differentiator between what you guys are doing?
Um, okay. The way that we derive value and the fact that you only need one. You don't need a team. You don't need to join a group of other people. You by yourself can grab one token and be involved in the ecosystem, and that's all you need. We're the only ones that kind of utilize that. And I would say that the most important part is that we are again, we're trying to emphasize the finding of players who not a lot of people believe in. That's our fundamental point of the game. There is no other fantasy game that I have played that helps utilize just that. Now, it helps in all leagues. Like, if you can find that player, it helps you to do the objective, right? But that is the objective in our game, is find that player.
That's cool, man. Yeah, so my friend Carson, who's out of all my friends, he's the biggest into sports and he does fantasy and he does this, he does that, he does everything in sports. His favorite thing is always trying to scout for those underrated players that people sleep on or don't know that much about or that he thinks has a lot of potential in. And even if he plays like FIFA or something like that, like he's trying to find these, underrated players. So essentially, your whole platform, the way it's designed, is it's heavily incentivizing people to not just pick the most prominent players that people know about, but to kind of scour around and find the people that could potentially outperform that not a lot of people buy those. But what's also interesting is if not a lot of people buy those low key, I mean, if a lot of people do buy those low key characters, then there might be an opportunity to actually buy the best characters if not a lot of people are buying them, because the pool is shared a lot less. So it's an interesting dynamic that you've built here, where it's like, yeah, you've created an opportunity if you're able to find someone super low key, and there's also this market dynamic of being able to say, hey, whoa, like this player is not getting bought nearly as much as he should, even though he's popular, because people are too busy trying to, look for
Mhm.
something else. It's interesting, and with this, it would seem that you would need a decent amount of people to participate or a decent amount of NFTs to be bought to handle all the different players. Like, how much do the NFTs cost? And have you figured out like how many people need to potentially participate to make this sort of model work?
Yeah, so we have ran a bunch of models. But if I can go back for a second, I want to emphasize we're not a betting site. You're not betting on players. You're just obtaining them, and then their value will fluctuate based on prior arrangements. That we have worked very close with lawyers to be compliant with the SEC, the Gaming Commission, and things of that nature. So, um, they can audit us. We have to be transparent. So, I just want to be very clear that we're not a betting site. This is a game. Um, Now, to get back to your question, um, uh, could you remind me of that again? I'm sorry.
I was just saying, like, it seems like there would have to be a decent amount of participants,
Oh, that's right. That's right.
and like I was also asking about the price of the NFT with that.
Yeah, so we've ran a bunch of models, and a lot of these models, those two questions correspond together. So we have an idea of how many people um, need to be in it for it to function properly. So we will make sure that that minimum requirement is met by minting the whatever's needed or falls short by the start of the season. We are not going to sell them for above their value. We're just going to simply put them on the marketplace, and whatever the current value is, you can get them without the mint fee. Um, Depending on how much people come in, we don't think it will be that much. But I just wanted to give assurance that if because there's a certain number where the math functions better, it just feels better. So we want to make sure that we're at least at that minimum. Um, the price of it, we want it to be utilized by everyone. So if you're a wealthy person, well, you can buy several, right? So on our site, you can actually say, I want to mint 5 of these, right? Depending on how much, available funds you have. But we also want it to be accessible for people who may not have that many funds, right? Kind of like the roll on the roulette table. You can use your chips, I can use mine. So the values I think we're really trying to look for is for the very low end players, somewhere around 30 ADA. And for the high end players, somewhere around 100 ADA. So I'm not trying to be really expensive. I would rather have more tokens in the ecosystem that derive the value than fewer tokens. This gives people options to have 3 of a player, and maybe they want to sell 2 of them, and then still hold on to one. It gives a little bit more flexibility. In our models, we found that there's people who don't like sports or fantasy sports, but look at the numbers as like a different perspective, and then they actually play the market. They're saying, well, the history of this person versus how many are minted versus the value. Like they're not even looking at sports. And I
Yeah.
think that weird dynamic where you're going to have people who think I'm better at predicting who's going to win, and then another person saying I'm better at looking at the numbers predicting, um, you know,
Value.
what's the move.
Yeah, it makes sense. And where are you guys at in this process? You mentioned that you had been working on it for 6 years now, like from the original idea. So right now, where are you guys at in the whole process of launching this?
Um, I would say the first 3 years was actually getting sufficient models and having them work. Um, I would even say that we weren't sure if this was a real business the first 3 years. It wasn't until it actually worked as well as it did that we got confidence. You know, I had people come talk to me and then say, this idea is actually really good. Like this is I know we're just playing around with thoughts here, but like we need to do this. So the people that we brought in are we each bring something to the table. But none of us by ourselves could have had this come to fruition. We have people who understand the business side of it. We have people who understand the computer side of it. And then we have people who understand the math side of it. And together, we were able to do this. So we have built this to where we're just now ending our beta, um, which was mostly to test the payout structure. We've been tweaking it on and off for about a year. Wanted confirmation, so we had a beta, which is actually still up for a couple more days if someone wants to try it with test data, test money, um, and then we are able to launch um, in just football. Eventually, we will be in all sports. They have to be designed first. There's some really promising models, but most of my time and most of our team's time has been making sure this thing comes out. So I'm not too worried about little things on the website. I want to make sure that the core game functions, and then those things will, become perfect. Right now, I think everything's perfect, but there's some like really niceties, like this, maybe when you buy a player, confetti falls down. Like, we'll continue to add to the site. Right now, it's pretty bare bones, but we wanted a sound built project first, and I think we're about there. We want to launch in the right around the draft, the day before the NFL draft. You'd be able to get in, and on draft day, the player's original starting value are going to be determined on where in the draft that they're drafted. That way, there's no bias on our part. We have this explained in our white paper a little bit, so you can read ahead to kind of get an idea. So if a player falls, I mean, we're not going to pick its value. It's predetermined.
That's awesome. And I'm curious on more of a personal note. I mean, you've been working on this for a long time now. What do you think has been the biggest challenges with trying to make this happen? Because it seems
Um,
very complex. There's a lot of moving pieces to figure out. And like you said, you've got to figure out the math behind this, and you're kind of doing something that hasn't been done. So there's a lot. Yeah, like what walk me through some of the challenges you've had to face in this process.
um, I can explain it like this. We before this interview, when we got together, we were discussing like where it's going to be, how how it functions. It was 5 a.m. and I replied within minutes. Like I'm a
Oh my
worker.
god.
I put so much time into this project. The most difficult part is not being able to sleep because your body has learned that sleep is not. I've gone. I've on a regular basis, I've gone 36 hours without sleep because this needed done. Got to get it done. So the best part is the fact that that's slowing down, and I've actually had time to relax a little bit.
I feel that. I haven't really had to go through the 36-hour thing too much, unless I'm flying somewhere. But yeah, no, I think that's one of the things with the project founders. People don't realize like how much stuff, how much like work gets into it, and sometimes you need to get things done by a certain time, and you've just got to get them done. And yeah, that's it. That's insane. And how does it feel now to be, I guess, this close after so long?
It feels great, honestly, because one of the things that pushed me and a lot of people a part of this is it just sounds like a fun game, and I want to play it. And I think that being so close to where to see it come to fruition puts me in a little bit of a bias, but I think it's cool because not because I made it, but because we made it because it was cool. And the best part for me right now is it's getting close to playing for real. And I just want to see it.
Yeah, and I'm also curious, like, what's your background? Like, I know you used to play poker back in the day. I'm guessing you're super into. You said you had a lot of experience in football. Like, what's kind of your background before starting this project or while building this project?
Well, I have time. So actually, there's a lot to cover. But I actually did a YouTube channel for a short while, breaking down NFL plays, what you're looking for, what this means, that means, that things like that. Um, but my background that allowed this, I think, to happen was I was a truck driver over the road. So when you're talking about 14 hours a day, 5 days a week, there's a lot of time where you're not able to really do anything, right? I can't do anything but listen or talk. So having that amount of time to just think about things, put my background in football, my love for crypto, and just mesh the ideas together. Um, a lot of the math to me was easy, um, but I love math. We ran me and Gunny, who that kind of brought us together. We've created algorithms to uh, predict outcomes to like spreads. Found out really fast that that's a highly competitive field, and even if you're successful, which over 3 years we were over 80% picking the spread. Um, People really don't believe you, and then you can't really benefit from it because if you don't know when you use those sites, they only let you play if you don't win. If you win on a regular basis, they have a right to refuse service, and they will stop letting you play. So after like 3 or 4 sites no longer allow us to be on, to be on their site, I mean, I kind of stopped, but I use that as an example to explain like the math part of it. That's the easy part. I love math, and then finding it like a puzzle, the algorithms on what works and why, analytics, things like that. I wrote papers on uh, college players coming out, you know. So I think eventually, um, in like the future, I would like to have a site that utilizes not only the game, but provides a space for people who, like me, could write. And we could have our own writers, we could have our own analytics. We could have, I really want to start the YouTube channel up eventually with some of the information to make the hard things easier for people. For example, like, this guy looks good because there's not a lot of mints on him, and he won 3 times in the last 7 weeks. Stuff like that. I think is a very niche uh, possibility that doesn't exist right now because our game doesn't exist. So the passion of football, the passion of crypto, um, that's that's not going anywhere.
Love it, man. And kind of the next question that is coming to my head here is friction and challenges that you're expecting to come up. Because you've had challenges building the platform, figuring out a lot of stuff. The platform is almost ready to go. What do you expect or foresee to be like the biggest hurdles you'll now have to jump through in this next step? And to add on to that, like onboarding people, how do you plan on doing that? Because that tends to be, from my experience, the hardest thing for projects when they actually launch the product is getting people to use it.
Yeah. So my biggest hurdle is being able to connect any issues with our team, making it easy. Things like a web wallet working with our site. We don't control the web wallet that you use. So I have to make sure that we know all those problems. Actual problems I'm not worried about. The developers from JetPlane are amazing. They're very fast and very good at what they do. So I'm not worried about that part of it. Um, Onboarding new people, I think, is where I'm focused right now. Because I said before, I wanted it familiar and I wanted it similar to things. And what I'm finding out now is people who are searching for something new, something innovative, they see us and they think we're the same, and we're not. And it's really hard to explain to somebody other than like a long duration podcast of why we're different and how we're different. But I think over time, when people play it, um, it'll be their friends that come in and they'll ask them these questions. And I think it will be a snowball effect. So by design, the ecosystem will grow because once you mint a token, those funds are in the ecosystem until that player retires. So the ecosystem will grow. People can come and go as they please, but eventually we're going to get to a place where um, the player count, the users in the site will grow, and hopefully it's quicker than some of these projects really pushing to get people in. But if it's slow, then it's slow. However, the people who are in the beginning, they have a really unique opportunity, and it's just because of the math. If there's 10 people in our game, then 3% of that goes to the payout. Okay. If there's 1,000 people in our game, then the values are the same, but the payout is now a lot bigger. So the winnings, the purses are going to be bigger. So you're going to have this kind of leapfrogging cartwheel in the beginning as new players come aboard. It will be equal to everybody else, even the people who just joined. But the longer you're in it, um, you're a very advantageous situation. Um, Eventually, this will topple off as the player numbers start to slow down. But with any project or any new company, you were to assume that more people are going to play it tomorrow than the day before. Maybe that's just one or two, but it will grow because right now, essentially, nobody's playing. That number is zero. So it can only go up.
Yeah, you'd hope so. From zero, you'd hope so. But dude, man, this is exciting stuff. Yeah, I haven't seen this done before. And even though I'm not like huge into sports, I find it really interesting to be able to not bet on these markets, but play a game within these markets. And um, being able to identify some of these players and opportunities, I think is super dope, man. And it's cool that you're doing something unique too, because I feel like oftentimes in this space we see the same 10 things. But it sounds like that at least the route and system that you're going about this is hasn't been done, and I haven't personally seen it. I've seen stuff like, DraftKings, obviously, but nothing in the crypto space with this sort of model. Um, but dude, Jared, kind of my last question here is what's your hopeful long term vision here in the next 5 years of running this project? Where do you hope to see fundamentals go?
I touched on this a little earlier. I would like to be in every major sport in their own ecosystem. I would like to have writers, analytics. I would like to have more social media output. Once our attention can kind of get away from making sure that the games are functioning, with that extra time, I don't want to slow down. I just want to go into other things. If that means, a bigger social media presence, if that means developing something, I want to provide value as much as possible. Um, you know, because one of the key reasons why the math works so well is that, like I said, when people sell tokens or NFTs, they're essentially selling tokens and NFTs. When you mint one on our game, that money, the value of that player is going into the ecosystem to make that token liquid. So we have to make sure that it runs well and then monetize other things. If I can get you to, you know, get our users to want to watch a YouTube channel, if I can get our users to want to, read some news, that's kind of where I want to go afterwards. If that makes sense.
Building an ecosystem around it
Right.
and a community around it. Yeah, I mean, I think building a community with this is going to be super important. Content creation, super important. I think like once you guys have a lot of the development done and the platform out, yeah, it'll all be about onboarding and building a community and getting people excited to play and getting people to talk about opportunities and deals. No, this NFT is actually a really good deal right now, or oh, like, does anyone want to buy this NFT off me? And they can sort of trade players with it. That'll be the big goal. I agree. And YouTube, man, that's awesome that like YouTube is a grind, I know, as someone who has like a channel, but it can be very fulfilling when you start to grow a community out of it. And I think that'd be a really great way for you to funnel people into your project. You being able to talk about the players and stuff.
I would love to see the player values run on a little ticker below the ESPN people talking. That would be cool. But we also, we have merch. Um, you can also buy as well. So we're doing things slowly. Like I said, all the emphasis right now is to make sure that that actually functions perfectly. Then all the other stuff, I'm going to take this time that I invest on a daily basis and put it somewhere. It's not going to. I don't think there's ever going to be a day where I'm sitting down at a beach. I'm going to keep putting in work.
Hell yeah. Well, Jared, thank you so much for coming on and teaching us a little bit about fundamentals today. Best of luck with everything you do. It's been a pleasure getting to know you a little bit more throughout this podcast. Before we wrap things up, was there anything you wanted to say? Any news announcements that you want people to know about?
At this stage, the best place to be is either following us on Twitter, which is FFUNduhMENTALS, or on our Discord. Our Discord is really starting to develop features and games in itself. But if you want a lot of up to date information, those are the two best places right now.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, go check them out, guys. Once again, pleasure meeting you, Jared. Good luck with everything. It was nice meeting you, and thank you to everyone that listened in today as well.